was doing. He actually wrote stories. Here he is at Arizona State College homecoming dedicatee in 1959. He got to ride in a Volkswagen convertible Beetle downtown with the king and queen. And here he is with his Jumars in a place called Blacktail Canyon, 1968. He, after meeting Merrill Club was the kind of guy who proudly announced his feats to anybody who would listen. He wasn't shy about talking about what he'd done. Harvey wasn't really like that. He didn't really thump his chest, but Harvey, his competitive fire was roused by Merrill Club proclaiming that he had the most first ascents, the most ascents of buttes of any man alive in Grand Canyon. And so it didn't take long for Harvey to set his sights on Merrill Club's record, and he went after it full force by the mid-60s. He, of course, most of the Grand Canyon buttes, or I shouldn't say most of them, but a lot of them don't require technical skills to surmount, and Harvey took full advantage of this. So he started collecting first ascents like Easter eggs and just putting them in his basket. And it was just his sole focus to put himself in the record books and make sure that nobody could beat him. And by the time it was all said and done, he had the most first ascents of anybody in Grand Canyon. Harvey became especially passionate about this butte, Wotan's Throne, which is about 7,600 feet, and that's the inner gorge there. That's about 2,800 feet, so it looms pretty high over the canyon. And Harvey became obsessed with Wotan's Throne for a couple of reasons. This is an aerial shot by Douglas Schwartz. I just wanted to point out the route to Wotan's Throne, which is right up there like that. And Merrill Club claimed that he had the first ascent of Wotan's Throne, and this group of people right here from the Museum of Natural History claimed that they had the first ascent of Wotan's Throne in 1937, and so there was some controversy. And Harvey took it upon himself to figure out who had actually made the first ascent, and he ended up climbing it himself twice. And for whatever reason, he just became obsessed by this particular view, and it's very recognizable, featured in a lot of photographs that you might have seen from Cape Royal. And Harvey's ashes are now resting up on top of that view too.
By 1963, besides climbing buttes, there were a few things that could put somebody in the record book other than the first ascents, but there was one thing that was still coveted, kind of like climbing a mountain like Mount Everest. The first person on top could gain lasting fame. For Grand Canyon, the equivalent in the canyon would be the first traverse of the canyon. We know that the first traverse by river gave John Wesley Powell fame, so Harvey knew that if he could do the first traverse of Grand Canyon Park, it would possibly bring him fame. Well, another guy had the same idea hatching his head, this fellow named Colin Fletcher. Fletcher had never been to the Grand Canyon prior to 1962. He showed up and it was infatuation at first sight. Hey, I can hike this and write a book about it and become famous. Well, Fletcher, he just happened to live next to Doc Marston in Berkeley, and he knew Marston was a canyon fan, and so he asked Marston, hey, do you know anybody who knows Grand Canyon? And Marston introduced him to Harvey Butchart, and so he instantly, just like that, he had the #1 guy who could tell him about Grand Canyon. And so, you know, he discovered that all the experts on foot totaled one, a math professor in Arizona State College, that was Harvey. And so Fletcher, here he is. He was born in Wales. He was 40 years old in 1962. He was a guy who, at 19 years old, had been in the British Royal Marines. He fought on D-Day, at Normandy. He had a lot of battle scars from that post-traumatic stress disorder. He became a farmer in Africa, and then he built roads in Rhodesia, and ultimately found he was best at toiling the earth by pen and boots, and not by a plow or a shovel. And so Fletcher had this plan, but he didn't know if it could be done. So he asked Harvey if it could be done, and Harvey showed him his map, and his map showed that you could, in fact, 18 years whittling away, and he was one hike away from finishing it. All he had to do was this little section below to Huda Point and Great Thumb Point. This is Great Thumb Mesa. Over here would be South Bass. And it was about 4 miles of 225. That's all he had left. And Fletcher said, great, let me at it. So he took off, and Harvey said, well, I'll be danged if I let that guy beat me, because he was very competitive. So without telling Fletcher, 2 days before Fletcher was going to go, Harvey snuck down there and finished the route. But anyway, this is Fletcher. Actually, he didn't want to be known as a one-hike wonder in Grand Canyon, so he had to go in 1966 and hike a lot farther than he did for his Traverse the Canyon hike. But anyway, what really bothered Harvey in time was the fact that Fletcher in his book, The Man Who Walked Through Time, which is the story of his journey through the length of Grand Canyon, he takes credit for being the first man to walk the length of Grand Canyon. And he knew full well that Harvey had done it first. And Harvey knew it, and so they had a kind of a falling out, which is kind of tragic. They were very different people. Fletcher was very much into spirituality of the canyon. Harvey was left brain, and Fletcher would say, oh, Harvey, it was an obstacle course for him. For me, it's a museum. You know, it's a church. And then they had a falling out. They never did hike together, but Fletcher made a bet with Harvey, a nickel bet, that he could do it, and Harvey was more than happy to give him the nickel, and Fletcher has that nickel on his wall to this day. It's a great story. It's priceless for Grand Canyon, really.
The photo I opened up with in the program showing Tom there at the top of that red wall cliff, I want to get a little deeper into that story right now. Following the construction of Grand Canyon Dam in 1963, the temperature of the Colorado River dropped to the point where air mattress travel no longer was practical for Harvey. You'd have to have a wetsuit or a dry suit to survive, and that was just too much weight for Harvey to want to carry. And so he was facing the same problem he originally had, how to reach difficult side canyons that had no trail access in Grand Canyon. And he eventually figured out that there was a 50-mile stretch of river between the Bass Trail and Havasu Canyon that had absolutely no river access off the south rim. There was no way that anybody knew of to get through the red wall limestone, and 50 miles of Grand Canyon was translated to over 100 foot miles. And once he realized that, the search of his Grand Canyon career was on. By the way, this is Conquistador Isle from the rim of Great Thumb Mesa near Enfilade Point. And that's just showing a stretch of that country that was so impregnable. Here's the South Bass area, and here's Havasu. I just wanted to point out that all of this river here, all these canyons, Fossil, Forster, area near Deer Creek, Olo, Matcatamiba, nobody knew how to get into those places in the 1960s. Harvey went down to Supai, and he interviewed a man named Wallen Burrow, whose father used to farm a cornfield down at the mouth of Fossil Canyon, which is in that stretch. And at this time, Wallen Burrow was probably in his 70s. He was definitely an older fellow. And he told Harvey that, yes, they did go off Great Thumb Mesa down to Fossil Canyon, but he couldn't remember where. And so Harvey knew that there was a route somewhere in those 50 miles of Grand Canyon, and no other clues. This is a defensive, or supposedly a defensive Anasazi ruin at the rim of Great Thumb Mesa near Enfilade Point. And this was the area where Harvey began to narrow his searching. This route that took 12 years to put together didn't come without a little trouble. Harvey made a trip down Royal Arch Creek in the 1960s, and his goal was to get to the east side of Great Thumb Mesa to see if he could find this route from below. So he was going to go down to the river at Royal Arch Creek, go downstream, and see if he could come at it from below. Unfortunately, he made a bad move by jumping across a pool of water off of a boulder while wearing a fully loaded backpack, and one of his heels snapped on impact. The other heel was bruised severely, and he couldn't walk. One of his friends had to go and grab a ranger from the south rim. They brought a helicopter and landed right on top of Royal Arch itself, because that was the only level ground in the area. And there's Harvey in the helicopter, and he actually took some pictures with routes on his flight out. He said he enjoyed it. But he was back before too much longer, and little by little he began chipping away at this route, taking trip after trip out there, slowly figuring out, through the help of a few charcoal pictographs here, a rock pile step there, that there was, in fact, an old Anasazi route in this area. And the crux, of course, came down to the red wall limestone, the thickest and sheerest formation in Grand Canyon. I just want to show you, this is his line to signify a 12-year effort right here. That's 5,000 feet, or almost 5,000 feet, rim to river. And this is a ruin that's at the foot of that route near the Colorado River. And when Harvey finally made it through the red wall that day, when he said this place startled him, he found this ruin, and he knew for sure that he was on the right track, because not only was there a ruin at the head of the route, there was one at the river.